Betsy, we call the roll, please.
I note that all board members are in attendance this evening with the exception of Richard.
Okay, thank you. We've got two items coming out of closed session tonight. Those are the closed session minutes, meeting minutes of October 22nd and November 6th, 2012. I need a motion to approve those minutes as presented in your board packet tonight.
I move.
Thank you, Steve. And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. And call the roll, please.
Carter.
Yes.
Kopp.
Yes.
Harley.
Yes.
Cutter.
Yes.
Weitzel.
Yes.
Nusis.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Next is our need a motion to approve our agenda as presented in your board packet tonight. Need a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Lisa. And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, John. And all in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay. And then we have our communications, our good news reports. Carrie?
Mr. Viola?
Oh.
Mr. Viola is going to make a presentation first.
Oh.
Good evening. On behalf of myself, fellow administrators, and all of the schools in the district, we would all like to thank you all for your dedication and time to the Ball-Chatham School District. And in recognition of School Board Appreciation Day, we would like to donate the books that are sitting before you to all the libraries in each of our schools. In each book, a label has been placed with all of your names and the year, but feel free to sign the books. I know there's a lot of them if you wish as well, but we would just like to thank you all for everything that you do for all of us here in the district. So,
Okay. Thank you.
thank you very much.
I'll pass them down as we...
Can I borrow this one?
You have to have your child check it out.
Yeah, all right.
And I'd echo what Joe said. You know, it's a thankless job with many, many hours, and we as administrators see it firsthand. But I don't know that everyone sees how many hours you put into your volunteerism here, and the importance, the role that it plays in the school district, and you know, everything funnels through your leadership. So we are very grateful for our board that we have, and thank you for all of your time. So thank you, Mr. Viola.
Thanks, Jim. Next item is our Titan truck.
Betsy, you want to pull that up? Oh,
Our information, there it is.
The Titan Truck Protect was a huge success again this year. We had great weather and lots of people turned out. The Titan Truck Protect raised over $23,000, and it was, like I said, I think it's one of probably my favorite events in the district, because you see families run together, and you know, from the young up through, you know, many families running together, and just a really neat event. And this year we have a new director, and Lisa's sister, Julie Nortel-Briggs, and she did a dynamite job stepping in. Betsy helped her kind of, you know, get to know what this event is all about. But what a great way to you know, encourage our families to be active and to get out there and raise funds for the school district, but also have a good time together running in the Truck Protect. So I thought it was a great event.
And,
It was fun to see staff out there too.
Yeah, and Julie could not have done it without you, Betsy, so thank you.
No, she's awesome to work with. Can't wait she has so many good ideas for next year. I can't wait to see what she comes up with.
She did a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And our teachers and administrators are always so grateful too for all that the foundation gives them. So they do great work.
Next item is our Chicago Sun-Times, top 100 public schools.
Mr. Lee, do you want to?
The
Sure.
annual Chicago Sun-Times report comes out on race all the high schools in the state of Illinois, and this year we were 76th. We are almost always in the top 10%, so a little outside of that, but goes to show once again that we have outstanding students, parents, community, and all that support comes together to make what is a great high school, and it's nice to be recognized yearly by the Chicago Sun-Times.
Thank you. Congrats.
Yes, great job. And then anything else, Carrie? Is that it? Good news? Okay.
That's good news. Very
Next
good.
item we have then is opportunity for visitors to address the board concerning any agenda topic. Anybody wish to address the board tonight? Okay, thank you. We move into our consent agenda under item 6, and And our consent agenda items 6.1 through 6.9. Does anybody wish to pull any of those out for individual consideration? If there are none, I'll need a motion then to approve our consent agenda items 6.1 through 6.9 as presented in your board packet tonight.
So moved.
Thank you, Alan. A second, please.
I'll move.
Thank you, John. And Betsy, call the roll, please.
Harley.
Yes.
Potter.
Yes.
Weitzel.
Yes.
Carter. Yes. Cop.
Yes.
Eustace.
Yes. Motion passes. Next item we have is personnel consent agenda items 7.1 through 7.29, unless that's changed. No, 7.29. Is there anybody who wishes to pull anything out for individual consideration? If not, then I need a motion to approve that personnel consent agenda item as listed in your board packet tonight. John, thank you. And a second, please. Thank you, Linda. And Betsy, call the roll, please.
Potter.
Yes.
Weitzel.
Yes.
Carter. Yes. Cop.
Yes.
Harley.
Yes.
Eustace.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to old business. 8.1, our process for bond sales.
I'd like to introduce Ann Noble from Stiefel Nicholas, and she's going to give us some more information on our bond sales.
All right, super. Hand these out to you guys. If you wouldn't mind
I'll just pass them.
passing them down.
Thanks.
I give you enough there. I have a few extras.
And while
if I
Ann's
need.
passing out, I'm going to publicly thank her. Her work, and Tammy also, did so much work with our campaign committee to understand, make sure that they understood all that went into the referendum and all that went into the bond sales. And, I think it was so important. And they said so many times publicly that they really appreciated really knowing and understanding what the issue was and understanding how the bonds would be sold and staggered. And that was all because of Ann and her whole team's work, because they really sat down with our team to help them understand everything that went into the bond sales. And I think that was critical to our success. So thanks to you for all of that.
Appreciate
Plus she was
that.
cheering on the sidelines too. She told me.
Great benefit on that. Great money. I just wanted to highlight for you tonight some actions and activities. The day after the election, we had a conference call with Carrie and Patrick to start this process rolling. So we've been working diligently since then, and the board will be asked to take some action over your next couple of meetings. So I wanted you in advance to understand a little bit about what was going on and why we were coming before you, sort of what the steps were, because it all seems a little convoluted, but there is a method to the madness. So I've highlighted briefly for you here in this handout what you can expect. What we're doing first is only financing part of the bonds that the voters approved. The voters approved $35 million. We're planning to finance about $17 million of the 35. Just to get you started on your projects, because the length of time that all this construction is going to take is a number of years. And there's no point in borrowing money very, very, very far in advance of when you need it, because the interest expense, even though interest rates are at historic lows right now, the interest cost on the bonds is much higher than what you're going to earn on it sitting someplace unused. So we're only going to borrow about half
just
of
to
it.
have you go over there, just so the mic can
Oh,
pick
sure.
you up. I'm sorry,
Oh,
Ann.
no problem.
I should have told you
I
that
didn't
before.
even know there was a mic.
Okay,
All
just so
right.
that they can all hear, and I think
No
Mr. Bandy's
problem.
mic can pick you up better. Okay.
I
Thank you,
can
Ann.
pull it up on here. If it's, is the attachment here? Do you know?
Which one would it be? The bond
Presentation.
resolution or the bond presentation?
Presentation.
Yeah, the presentation, right. There we go.
Actually,
Great.
would you like me to run this, or I can switch it to your computer and you can run it?
You can run it. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank
All
you. That way the audience can see what we're doing. So we're on the next page. So what we're talking about doing is selling about half of what the voters approved, with the target being holding your bond tax rate flat. Okay, that's the goal. Finance $35 million, flat tax rate. So the plan is to sell these in 4 pieces at the current time. That can change over time if your timeline on your construction projects were to change. We can tweak this. But right now we've outlined a plan that assumes that we'll sell 2 pieces of bonds basically back to back. We're going to sell 1 piece in December, coming right up, and then we're going to sell another piece immediately following that in January. And the reason we're doing that is the 3rd bullet point there. We're splitting them in pieces to benefit from a tax benefit that we call bank qualified status. And that basically means any bank that purchases bonds for what the IRS defines as a small issuer, that bank gets a tax benefit. And in exchange for that tax benefit to them, they will buy your bonds at a lower interest rate for you, okay? And that benefit to you right now is almost 0.5% in interest expense. So it's pretty substantial when you start talking about millions of dollars over many years. So in order to be considered that small issuer to get this benefit, you can't sell more than 10 million in a calendar year. So we're going to split the 17 million of project funds into two pieces, each less than $10 million. Okay, so that you get that tax benefit this year, and then you get the tax benefit again in January for the 2013 calendar year. Okay, so we're going to have to ask you to approve things twice and go through steps twice, but I promise it's worth it. Okay? So that's the strategy for what we're going to be doing over the next couple of months. Are there any questions about sort of the approach?
What's the breakout between 12 and 13 on the 17 million?
We're doing just under 10 million in December, and then approaching 8 million in January. And the reason it totals 18 million instead of 17 is we're doing about $1 million of refinancing or restructuring on your current bonds to keep that tax rate flat. Okay, so it's about 10 and 8. The final numbers will depend on final interest rates, but it'll be something like that. Okay.
And we have 5 years, correct me if I'm wrong, to do from the referendum to do up to the 35 million.
That's correct. The voter authorization is good for 5 years. Okay. Can we go to the next page, Betsy? Nobody can read this. I'm sorry. Just suffice it to say, there's a lot of work that went into this, and what this is our plan over the next 5 years to get $35 million worth of bonds sold and keep your tax rate flat. Okay, so this models all 4 sets of bonds that we have planned in that sort of blue-gray shaded area. Every set of bonds is modeled in there to get you to 35 million plus a little bit of refinancing and restructuring as needed so that the far right-hand column over there stays at 0.7. That's your tax rate. Okay, so we're solving for that. Every time we sell bonds, we resolve all of this to hold that far right-hand column at the 70 cents. Okay? And I will happily go into any details on any of this that anybody wants, but in the interest of time, I won't do that unless you want me to.
And Ann, I don't know if you pointed out, so the blue area is what we're selling, and then the others are existing.
Right, that's right. To the left of that gray shaded area are your existing bonds, so we're modeling
Existing
around
debt,
those,
yeah.
of course. Okay.
And we have cleaner copies, if anybody wants it,
Yes.
of that, same thing.
Absolutely. And all the backup schedules that go behind it.
If anybody wanted to see our schedule of payments.
We'll give to Ellen. Okay?
Yeah.
So our existing is like 11 million.
I
What was
think
the question? I'm
Our
sorry.
existing, is this the 11 million figure?
Let's see. You have, yeah, that's right.
Mhm. Yep.
That's part of your existing,
And then
but then you have more than that. You
Right.
have 11 million plus the 05s that are about 10 million, and the 2010 Bs. Can you back up again, Betsy? It's this plus that. Those are your 3 sets of outstanding bonds. And when we sell, as we sell each series of bonds, we'll give you final schedules for each set that shows what it looks like as each one gets fixed. Okay, because right now, obviously, these are all just estimates. And I apologize, it is really blurry. I didn't realize how blurry it was. So, any other questions on that?
Existing ones were basically 11, 10, and 4, is that what it is?
That's right. Okay. All right, and then the timeline that you all will be seeing us work through over the next couple of months. We're here tonight to do an overview. Wednesday night you have a special board meeting, and as one of your items on that night's agenda will be to approve what we call a parameters resolution that will cover both sets of bonds, both the ones we're going to do in December and the ones we're going to do in January. And what a parameters resolution does is it sets exactly that. It sets your parameters. It sets not to exceed interest rates, not to exceed amounts, not to exceed levies. Everything is capped by this resolution. What it allows us to do is ask you to take action one time. Then we can sell bonds twice, and each time board delegates, which will be the board president and either the superintendent or the chief business official, two of those three parties, the board president always is one of them, have to sign the final authorization for each set of bonds, the final interest rates and everything after the bonds are actually sold. So the board's parameters action will lay the groundwork, but nothing's final until the bonds are sold. So you'll do that on Wednesday night. We couldn't do it tonight because the county has not posted the final canvassing of your votes. Otherwise, we would have just done it in one fell swoop tonight. But this way, at least you have a chance to absorb before you don't have to take any action. And then early in December, we're having a conference call with Standard & Poor's and PMA, the district's financial advisor, and myself to review and establish the district's credit rating. This is a very important process. We're doing a little rehearsal call with Carrie and Patrick on Wednesday to go through some tips and things to expect from that call. Your credit rating is what determines your interest rate, because the market doesn't know who you are by and large. I promise there'll be some local banks that buy some of your bonds, they know who you are. But a lot of the market doesn't know who you are. So most investors will just look at your credit rating when they're trying to decide whether you're a good buy or not. So the higher your credit rating, the lower your interest rate. So we really want the district to be able to put your best foot forward with Standard & Poor's, tell your story from your perspective so that we get the best possible rating out of that process. Okay, so we'll be doing that on December 5th, and then the first bond sale is currently scheduled for December 12th. That's somewhat fluid based on market conditions. If we want to jump in a little bit earlier than that, we can, or a little bit later. The closer you get to the end of December, the less attractive the market generally is. So we really, you want to be in the market before Christmas, basically. After that, forget it. Nobody's buying. Okay. And then at your regular December board meeting, we will have bond documents for signature that will finalize everything. And then allow the bond closing to take place on December 27th. That's when you would get the first bunch of revenue from the first sale of bonds would be December 27th, and then we do the whole thing again in January. We sell the second set of bonds January 15th, and you get funds in early February. So that's the process that you all will see. We'll be doing lots of work behind the scenes, and Patrick and Carrie have already been hard at work trying to deal with all our little requests. But hopefully it'll be a smooth process from your perspective. Tammy Beckwith-Shelmo from PMA, as I indicated, is your financial advisor. I'm the bond underwriter. We work as a team. But Tammy will be here Wednesday night, so you'll get a chance to meet her as well. And she'll walk you through approval of the parameters resolution.
And will any of these bonds be available to be purchased from the public?
Yes, we will run an ad in the paper so that people know where to buy one, and make them available by zip code, basically. So anybody that has basically we'll probably open it up to the entire Springfield area. So anybody from this general region will get first priority to buy bonds, and that would include local banks as well.
When did you say you would do
And
that?
roughly what?
I'm sorry?
When did you say you would be doing
It'll be
that?
the 12th.
We will do that a few days before the 12th. The bond pricing is scheduled to happen on the 12th. I haven't checked with the paper to figure out exactly my timing yet. I'm running my ad. Typically, we run it about 5 days before the sale. And I'll get a copy of that to Patrick so he could share it with you all, so you can have a copy of it.
did you have another question?
No, that's it, thanks.
Any
Any
other
other
questions? If not, thank you very much for all of your help on this, and I think we'd be remiss in not thanking the community right now for their support for this too, because this is vital to the health of this school district for years and years to come. Out past 2030 is what we're looking at, and it's just I can't thank the community enough, and I think the board shares that opinion also. We can't thank the community enough for supporting this this referendum the way they did. We were hoping for 55-45, but when we get 66-30, 30-something, it's amazing. So
Yes, and all the community members and the folks who led the referendum team, and just
Absolutely.
great. I can't thank them enough. I know that, gosh, that Monday morning before Election Day, I was getting texts and emails, and I was having coffee with some friends, and everyone's like, we need more brochures, we need to pass out more stuff. I said, okay. So then the group came through, so I'm just grateful for all the
There
support.
weren't a lot of successful referendums.
Very true.
So you're one of the lucky few. So your community is being very good to you in times
Yes.
that a lot of aren't.
That's very true. Very good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll do our best to get the biggest bang for your buck.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Ann.
you, Ann. And we'll see you Wednesday night.
Tammy will
You
be
won't
here.
see me
Oh,
and
just
Tammy. We're
Tammy?
doing
Okay.
a little tag team.
Okay.
We've got a lot of meetings this week.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Ann.
Take care.
Appreciate
Safe drive
it.
back.
Next item we have under old business, 8.2. It's a policy change. It's under second reading, policy 5.60. It's expenses, travel compensation, administrative procedure for expenses. And there's been some changes on this. This was pretty much, it's a yearly thing we do. It's based on IRS guidelines that we make these changes. But after some of the board members and administration being in Chicago for our annual school board conference, we found out that it's impossible to eat and do whatever you have to do on what the policy said at the time. So we've changed that. And if you got, let's see, what have we got here?
We just added in a line for
For
City of
City of
Chicago.
Chicago rates. And
It's a little bit higher.
a little bit higher, and you're pretty lucky even to find something at those prices, but you can. So that's the only modification that was made to this from last month's first reading. Are there any questions or comments about the changes and that? Because
With that change, we can still approve this without letting it wait
yes,
another month?
yes.
We've just always chosen to do it over the 2 months, but
Oh,
yeah.
And Patrick, you were okay with the Chicago edition?
Need to twist his arm.
I want to just ask a silly question. Maybe there's a silly answer. Are we working for our food anyway?
Well, yeah.
Up there.
Yeah.
But I mean, are we paying extra because the cost of food is higher, or are we? I mean, we eat at home, so I'm just curious.
Districts are, the same questions come up on our listserv, and districts are going back and forth on both of these issues. And saying, one say, if you were in the district, you wouldn't have been reimbursed for lunch. You would have provided, you would have brought it, you would have found somewhere to go or whatever.
I mean, I can understand the travel part and all that.
Sure,
But
and so food, unless it is specifically part of a conference registration that you have to pay for a meal or something to be part of that registration, then the district, of course, would provide that because you're going to be there, you're going to be networking, you're going to be doing what you're supposed to. It's part of that registration cost. But outside that, some districts across the state are not allowing any food reimbursement. The fact that you're going to the conference, some of the travel will be covered, but food won't, regardless. Outside of what is actually already provided by the conference itself, anything else is on your own. You would have been working anyway, and therefore kind of somewhat responsible for your own meals, snacks, as if you were in the district. Others have seen, well, you're not in your home environment, and things are not in a way where you could maybe make your sandwiches or meals in the same way that you maybe could at home. So they recognize that we have asked you to go to this, and as a benefit, if you will, we also want to support your meal up to a certain amount at least. And so there's two sides of that, and we're seeing districts starting to go on either side of that. Some are making the change to say none, and some are still sticking with, we recognize that while it's still somewhat minor, we still need to provide it because it's just the right thing to do. So it's a good question.
just curious.
It is.
Well, we've maybe made a little bit of a compromise because it's less than what we used to pay, so.
Yep.
And then if there's, it specifies that if it's included in the conference, you
Yes.
can't, you know, choose to eat somewhere else.
But boards across the state are discussing that exact question.
Yeah.
And
It's a good
somewhat
question.
divided. So there's not a clear-cut answer right now. It's whatever you feel locally is the right thing to do.
Good question. Any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Yes.
Then, based on Steve's comment, you know, obviously, those of us who go up to Triple I, how much other Chicago travel is there throughout the district? I mean, are there other conferences?
There are conferences.
There are some, in
Jill
fact,
sends
some
some
of-
people to Title I conferences and
Right.
things. And
Last year, we sent some of our district office staff for a finance training also that was up in the, actually in this immediate suburb area, but it was right there. And then this year, it's a little farther out, removed from the district, but it's in that same area and vicinity. And so we send some staff up there for some necessary training, so they get up there. But we also have some athletic teams and sports teams and other events in that area that will travel from time to time and would follow under the same guidelines if they're up there.
Your bigger conferences are always going to be held in
Yeah.
downtown Chicago, typically, in the suburbs.
I would imagine, especially with Common Core and everything still coming.
Yeah.
Reimburse the kids.
Yeah, there's no end in sight of that.
If we do.
Athletic teams, do we reimburse our teams who travel?
Well, there's the coaches who are going, and then as well as there's student, and if they're overnight, then there are some, we don't really have a guideline, which I'm hoping we can recommend in the near future, that guideline would stipulate about what students may be. Even what funds could be used from athletics, even though they've raised the money, still having a cap and some guidelines as to what they should spend, even when they're traveling to these other areas. We don't currently have one on the student side of it. Staff who are up there would, we'd still expect them to follow when being reimbursed even out of that activity fund, even though they've raised money for it, should still follow the same guidelines as if it was something else related to.
So an athletic team that travels somewhere else and misses, and who pays for the meals then for the actual team?
Sometimes it comes out of the athletic account, so they've done some fundraising through the year. Some of it's money they've set aside for anticipated travel for teams to go to some tournaments, overnights, if you will. Not even just the state tournament, but other holiday tournaments and other things they might go to.
It's usually out of camp money.
Camp money is primary use for it. But we don't have a specific policy that dictates on the student side what should or shouldn't be spent.
Okay. So I think it's a good idea to have that policy, another policy in place so that we can regulate that or help set guidelines.
Even
for
students
it.
who go on a field trip. I mean, there may
Yes.
still be an issue where there's lunch needs to be
Mhm.
provided, and you should still have a guideline of
Right.
what the district expects students should be,
Okay.
the district should help cover.
Let kids go on field trips.
Okay, anything else? Any other questions, comments? If not, I need a motion then to adopt the changes in policy 5.60 as presented tonight.
So moved.
Thank you, Alan. And a second, please.
Second.
John, thank you. Call roll, please.
Weitzel,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Kopp,
Yes.
Harley,
Yes.
Sweater, Nucis.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Next, we have our instructional updates. Technology is first. Chad?
I've asked Chad to give just an overview on where we're at with technology and then also talk to you about BYOD or one-to-one initiative. So
Okay.
we're going to tag team the one-to-one.
Okay.
So the updates that I have for you on the technology issues that we still had in the district from our conversion over to Citrix. The two issues that remain are video playing full screen and our active boards. Now, basically what we've kind of done in the past semester is we've taken the computers at GES and started streaming the OS to them there, which has allowed us to actually use the active boards there in a pretty consistent fashion, in which there's no real issues with the way those have been created. The other issue is the older boards that we bought about 4 or 5 years ago. It was the first purchase of active boards, and they went into more of the elementary buildings in those areas. They're still having issues, and it's more along the lines of the hardware that's attached to them that's causing the issues. So what I propose that we do is that we are going to buy refurbished desktop units that have a higher end processor in them, which will allow the boards to run and allow the video to run almost seamlessly, and put those in those classrooms that are still having issues with the active boards. It's already been tested in a classroom at CES. With pretty good results. I mean, we saw no issues with latency and or any type of issues where it makes us believe that we have problems with it in the future. And so those issues there are going to be solved by using our repair budget, which has been underutilized this year because we've gone to Citrix to repair those small issues that we still have with the active boards there. The video issue is also a hardware issue, and it's something that I've continually contacted Dell Weiss about and tried to get resolution on what we can do with it, because basically the device that we purchased was proposed to have options where we could actually use this chip that's in it right now that is not utilized to display video and flash video in the same form that we do with our Windows Media Player videos that are out there. That hasn't happened, and as far as I can tell, they still have not got a solution in place for it to make that work, and so I will continue to work with Dell Weiss on finding a solution for that one. On the one-to-one part of it, basically I got a timeline of what has happened since we first came to you with the bring your own device mentality that we had last year at the end of the year. Basically what came out of that whole pilot program is that we found that the diversity of devices and that there were multiple problems with the way we utilized those in the classroom because they weren't all a unified device, even with our Citrix environment. The types of things that they wanted to do with them weren't capable when you tried to use it in that diverse environment. And the actual issues with the devices themselves presented even more problems because it wasn't, this device has the same problem across the board. It was every device has their own different issues that you have with them. So basically what we did is we started looking at more of a, the other part of it was our participation problems. We had about 50% participation in it, which was a little bit under the number that we expected to have going forward. So basically what we did is we were going to fill the gaps with our own iPads or some variation, just do a kind of a varying iPad, bring your own device mix. They still posed a lot of problems with basically security on the iPads, since it's not a enterprise device, it is a personal device. There's no way to lock it down so that one kid's information would go on to the next person, and not the next person. In an environment where that device stayed with the student all the time, it would be fine. But in an environment where we're still keeping the iPads in the building and it's going from one class to the next, it's not going to work. So then we actually started looking at what other devices out there are capable of, producing the same results but still have security on them. And what came up to mind was we have our own private cloud. Let's looking at the actual public cloud. And so basically what we started looking at is Google Apps and the ability for that to be, taken by any computer anywhere and you'd be able to sign into it. And also the ability for that software to be collaborative against every student that's out there, allowing them all to work together. And we got to the point where the device that we looked at finally was Chromebooks. After their price dropped down to $249, they became a very viable option. And the other part of it is that they came out with the Citrix receiver at the same time that they dropped the price down. So now we have both our Citrix environment, the price drop, and just the ability for the students to be able to use an iPad, or not, I'm sorry, laptop with a keyboard, with the ability to be very productive in that type of environment. We basically said we need to really look at this, and so what we did is we went out to Rochester.
Yeah, so and it was interesting because the night that the BCF, the foundation, approved the $21,500, they approved it for iPads for 2 classrooms, and Mr. Lund was very excited about that. And then Chad and I went out to Rochester because we were going to take a team of people, and we went out there during a school improvement day, and we actually saw the Chromebooks in action. And when we found out that the price dropped, we're like, we can put more devices in our schools. And so we went out during the school improvement half day and saw them roll them out, and the Chromebook can hit the internet in 8 seconds. And they had the same thoughts that we did. Rochester bought 360 Chromebooks, and they bought it at the more expensive price initially. they're excited about the drop in price. But they just said that the iPads, there's just too many apps and the upgrades. You just can't manage all the iPads because you have to physically touch every single iPad in order to manage it. And with Chromebooks, you don't have to do that. So we then took a team, Mr. Lund and the instructional tech, Bob Cox and Tammy Hilby, and then 2 5th grade teachers went out and we visited for the day, or a good part of the day, the intermediate school, the junior high, and the middle school at Rochester. And we actually talked to kids and watched kids and then talked to teachers that have gone to this conversion, because this is a major shift on the demand of the teacher and of the student. And so when I say that, when I talked to some high school kids that said, hey, how'd you like this shift? And these were seniors. How'd you like this? They said it really, we didn't like it initially. And I said, well, why? And they said, we actually had to pay attention. Because the student engagement is if somebody raises their hand, they know that they're pretty much off the hook. But when the teacher says everyone will respond to this now, they're like, we had to pay attention. And they said it was a struggle. And so it was interesting. And then I had 6th graders sit down with me and show me that, I access this from home. I've taught my mom and dad to do this. I get immediate feedback. I can do the paper version if I can't connect from home because they haven't let them take them home yet. But they just said, the one thing that's taught them is they have to be that self-learner, and they have to manage their time, because you can't demand that an assignment is done the next day like a typical classroom. You got to give it a couple of days. And so they were able to, we've got to manage our time and schedule our time. It's more real life. And so we had a great day. I don't know if Mr. Lund, if you want to add anything, but what we found is that 8 seconds to access the internet, there are no virus issues, the battery life on a Chromebook lasts the entire school day. It syncs to the iPad, iPhone, and any laptop. When you go through Google, and you can explain that. You can edit documents from one and it saves automatically. So they can do it from anywhere. You don't have to buy apps. Some of the high schoolers at Rochester have started portfolios, the e-portfolios, but everything's time-stamped. Parents can see it. They can view other examples and good models. So, the engagement alone was worth seeing. So we had a great day. And they talked about, Rochester was very honest. Dr. Portrian sat down with us for a good hour and said, here are some of the things I'd recommend you not do, when you do this. So,
would you explain how, Chad, I understand Google Apps and that's all, on their servers or whatever. So when you say that you can sync that with an iPad.
Yeah, you can actually download the app for Google Apps and bring up those documents on your
iPad, so it's an app for the iPad.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
But it's very simple.
Yep. Now, right now, it's only documents for that part of it, but they have plans to roll out the spreadsheets and the PowerPoint presentations. So that's, every device out there has their own little quirks about them that they're still working on making solutions work. This is really a fast-moving pace that they're going to.
So you can only sync documents, but not
like Word documents. There's Word documents out on the iPads. Now you can actually go in through a browser and get the other stuff, but you can't edit them yet. So that's the issue. You can still see them, you just can't edit them on the iPad. So, but that's, like I said, another thing that's coming down the line. That's if you want to switch to
the other thing is, Mr. Lund's plan is that 9 of his 5th grade teachers will adopt it out of the 13. Some of them are going to do science, some are going to do social studies, some will do language arts. So he's got 9 that are very eager to get their hands on devices, and we were able to purchase more. The money goes a lot further. And so the foundation was nice enough to amend, and I thank them, to amend their vote to say you can go forth with purchasing Chromebooks versus iPads.
And it's perfect to know that the iPads and those things that we do have in the district, they still have a purpose at the lower levels. Most of these most of these districts that have gone to one-to-ones have actually shifted their iPad down to the K through 4 level, because the students are more apt to be able to touchscreen those and use them much more effectively than you would at a higher level, where you're actually doing writing papers and writing documents out. The keyboard becomes almost essential in those functions. And what I have up here is kind of our roadmap for what one-to-one has become in this district. And as you can see, you've got the circle that goes around the entire project. Anything that's inside that circle is the things that we have already worked towards and have gotten pretty stable in our environment. Basically, our internet bandwidth, I know we've had several instances in this district where we've had problems where the internet wasn't keeping up to speed, so we've actually approached those and got those resolved here. We use social media quite often. We have our websites out there. We have the teacher websites. In a one-to-one environment, they are actually talking about going much further than that and actually really getting kids involved in those social media sites. And we have ample teacher involvement and communication with parents and staff. And then on the outside, under the professional development, you've got the tech training. So we need one of the biggest things is getting the techs trained on all the apps and things out there that they're doing. And then transform classrooms, the technology that's going into them to really shift the way teachers actually are viewing it. Training the administrators, training the staff on a monthly and almost bi-monthly basis to get them to be able to use these applications in the shape and form that they're meant to be used. And then over the digital curriculum, you've got basically the things that we've always been using. We've got the search engines, we've got the videos that are out there for them to review. You've got the online encyclopedias, and they've always done research papers and projects on computers and things of that sort. But what they're really saying that we need to really focus on is doing like virtual field trips and
no more textbooks.
Yeah, no more textbooks, online textbooks, or even building your own curriculum based on what information they need to learn. You know, you have your goals for that class. You can actually build out curriculum using the technology to get where you need to go with it. And then as you get down around to the infrastructure, you can see we've really gotten a lot of that stuff done already. It's all in place, and that was there last year even when we started moving into this. But what we've seen that we need to still include in there is emails for students to get them to actually be able to communicate with teachers on a daily basis, to have that open communication with them. And then actually archiving that, just as we always have with any emails, is having that backup readily available if we need it. And then some of the other things in there is just the device unification. Like I said, when we're in Bring Your Own Device, it was that constant, what can we do on this device, what can we not do? With this, you basically eliminate that. There's a certain set of things that you can, and there are things that you can't do, but the majority of them are going to fall into the can category with our Chromebook initiative. So you basically get around the other side of it is communication. We need to basically really get out there and involve the community with this initiative. It's not just something that we do here, it really reaches out to the entire community. And you've seen that in a lot of the school districts that have already adopted a one-to-one basis. So.
I don't believe this document is in.
Yeah, I can get it for you.
Would you please?
Yep. In fact, if you guys have the Google app, I can share it with you.
I think I do.
Do we need board training too?
And when you talk about
that's the type of stuff that you can do with this. I mean, it's really amazing how much you can share and collaborate with.
So when you talk about expense, part of this is going to be when we start to adopt new textbooks, instead of putting that money into hard textbooks. It's really going to be talking about visual media and purchasing that. I mean, and that's something that Rochester shared with us. They renegotiated all of their textbook contracts. They don't recommend doing that first year of this, but and only buying classroom sets, or having teachers develop their own curriculum. And they also talked about the elimination of paper. That you have to count that money in there, because there will be an elimination of paper, which is a good thing. I mean, one of the schools, not Rochester, but another school not very far from here, said there was a $40,000 savings the first year. So, I mean, we're trying to think of ways that we can afford to do this. We also found Bob Cox and Chad went up to a meeting with Pearson, and we have a meeting this Wednesday with them to talk about what they have to offer. And it's a textbook company, but they found that several schools are charging a tech fee from $25 all the way to $95. And there's also the possibility of the parents owning the device over a 3-year period. So there's things that we're really thinking about outside the box in order to make this happen, because this is really where we need to be going with kids. So you have questions?
I'd just like to make a comment. I talked to Chad he was sitting in his office here this afternoon when I was in the
Right there.
district, right over there where Betsy is. But I attended a session up at the conference last week that was given by Maine South, their technology director, actually going through a lot of this stuff. They've used Google Books and Google stuff for 3 or 4 years now. They love it. They have, and one of the things I talked to the technology guy about was, the backup on this, and he's actually, what kind of tech support we need and that sort of thing, and he really runs it with less staff now than he has in the past. So, we're looking for ways to be able to afford this, and, just with normal turnover is a way to help pay for some of this stuff because you need less staff. But it's a way to get kids, as Jill said, to get them involved in it because they have to be involved in it. It's all done through their Chromebook. It's all done through the PC. It's all done through that. All of their homework is submitted on that. They do everything on that. The teacher corrects it or grades it and submits it back to them with whatever input there is there on it also. But he said you can have one at school and then you go home and it's right there. You can update it at home. It's just, and then the other savings is for textbooks because I don't know what we spend
And I'll
on
have to
textbooks.
plug that the biggest thing is the professional development. I mean, Rochester really stressed that. I mean, I'm thankful that we have 9 fifth grade teachers who want to go with this in a month or less. By the time we get the Chromebook in their hands, because they spent, Rochester spent 6 months lead time having people apply, and then a summer of 5 days of training. So, but the professional development is going to be a key piece that we have to do right in order to make this successful.
And that was one thing that he brought up, their technology director brought up also, that they actually, Maine South actually makes money by running tech training during the summer. And people in the Chicago suburbs send all of their people there so that they can be trained by the folks there, and that's how they offset some of their expenses too. So, yeah.
What kind of a cost difference is there between iPads?
The iPads are about $379, and these will come out about $380 or $280 at the most. So you get about $100 cost savings. It's not great, but when you're talking about the numbers that we're going to be purchasing, it adds up.
So if for every 2 iPads, you can get 3 Chromebooks, basically.
Right.
And you mentioned our
For
current.
every iPad, something, whatever. Math.
You mentioned our current technology issues.
Yes.
What kind of a time frame are we looking at getting them resolved?
Pretty quickly.
Or are they going to be obsolete before we move to the next phase?
No. Honestly, it's going to be real quick here to get these refurbished PCs in here and get them done. It'll probably be over Christmas break. We'll actually have the time to go into the classroom and fix them all. So.
How many do we have to do?
We're looking at about 80, I believe. 80. Yeah.
I have a question. When you use the Chromebooks, do parents have access?
Yeah, because actually you're really not, when you're using a Chromebook, it's just the type of platform you're using. You're really using the Google Apps that's out there for any computer to connect to it. The Chromebook's just the device that we picked because it has the keyboard, it has the screen. It's really in line with a very stable device that we can hand to a student and not really worry about it breaking on them or having parts fail on it. It's just, that's the type of mentality we're taking with devices now. It's not so much device dependent, it's more device independent. But we need to have a common one for our staff to be able to effectively support it.
And those will be used for the textbooks as well.
Correct.
Is that right?
Well, that would be the plan. I mean, we're not doing any major adoptions this coming year, but I mean, there's companies wanting to talk to us.
Sure.
And once we start to adopt Common Core, we're going to need to start looking at what we need to update.
When you talk about textbooks, one of the cool things about iPads is iBooks and the interactiveness of a textbook in iBooks. How is that the same?
We still have the same ability. Right now we've got Fall at Destiny, which I don't know how many of you actually.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Fall
at Destiny is our library software. It's got the same type of checkout system for ebooks as you do on an iPad. It's just the library has to be the one that purchases it, and they have to check it out on a student by student basis. It still follows the same guidelines as what a library would be, where you have to have a copy for each student. And that's, so a lot of those problems that come out of iPads are along those lines, where we can't manage the actual ins and outs of how many books are on an iPad. You have to buy it for every student. And then an iPad moves on to the next grade level, you really have to rebuy that same book for that student. You can't pass that iPad down to that student. You have to let it follow them with them. So those are some of the issues that we've seen with iPads and why we're struggling with it. We know that iPads are a great tool and that they have a lot of great features, but there are some serious management rules that we just can't seem to find a way around.
Like we had one today where someone's put a code on one.
The passcode lock the iPad,
Yeah.
and you can't stop that. There's no management feature that allows you to not allow you to put a passcode on it. And if the student gets a hold of it, puts a passcode on it, you gotta wipe it clean. So they really were never meant to be.
Thank goodness for the cloud. Huh?
Yeah, they were never meant to be an enterprise device where a lot of people are able to access it. They were meant to be
personal,
individual.
Yeah.
But I mean, with that said, there's still great features for K4. I mean, our K4, we don't need to be using them. And we saw a classroom at Rochester where they were using the iPads for one part of their science lesson in an 8th grade classroom and using the Chromebooks at the same time. So I mean, there's uses for them. But Lindsay Fesser and Tim Niemeyer have been the two 5th grade classroom teachers that have been piloting from last year to this year. And they've started to feel really comfortable with Google Apps and what it has to offer compared to an iPad.
And the key focus there is that they're sharing this 15 set of iPads with all the classes. And so it's not a huge management number. It's not like where you have one per student. It's here's 15 of them, share them between the classrooms and use the features to get what you need done on them. But it's not the device they take home with you and keep using. All right. Any other questions?
Anything else?
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Chad.
Common Core. Okay, this is just real brief. The teachers are gonna see a version of this. I've still gotta do some improvements to this for the teachers. But as you know, we talk in educational lingo, so we're gonna make sure that you realize what those stand for.
Thank you.
So, yes. So, before Common Core, you know that everything was aligned to the Illinois Learning Standards, which was adopted in 1997. And some of us were around then. And there was controversy about Illinois Learning Standards years ago. And so we want to talk about who's leading it. And I know some of you were in Chicago and went to something on Common Core and Park. And so I wanted to talk to you about who's leading this initiative. And you can see the Council of State School Officers and the National Governors Association are leading it. And then so we talk about why Common Core. And a lot of it's tied to the race to the top of dollars. And Illinois adopted the Common Core standards June 24th of 2010. And so when they applied for the race to the top dollars, which we were selected as a state, but we did receive extra points if we agreed to change to the standards for student assessments. So we went to Common Core. And a lot of this, I mean, I think this is very good where we're heading. We are no longer, the states are no longer their independent contractors. And I can tell you from a building level experience, and several of us in this room can tell you that when we had students move in from out of state, we'd know, depending on where in the United States, how strong their educational background would be. I mean, you just kind of, in the 9 years that I was at the middle school, I could tell you, and I won't share that, but if you were from the East or the West, you always knew. The common standards will provide a greater opportunity to share experiences and best practices within and across the states and nationally, and will improve our ability to serve our students best. So there will no longer be the apples to oranges comparisons. So we talk about why, and there's some bullet points, and so it's going to address the mobility, equity, and consistency by making the expectations clear. Our students are going to be able to compete. They're college and career focused, accountability and research based. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. It forces a common language for educators. And what we just talked about is going to encourage that digital media part. And then it'll allow the boards of education to do policy changes and the states to do policy changes when needed to help students and educators meet those standards. This initiative is supposed to affect 43.5 million students, which is about 87% of the student population in the United States. So we ask more about why, and I want to talk about what kids have changed. As no matter what you want to say, kids have changed. And here's a perfect example of something I learned reading through some stuff that the coaches gave me. Kids will play a video game an average of 100 hours to get good at it. They're not getting grades. They're not getting extra credit. They're not winning money or getting public acclaim. And so the second time they play the game, they figured out the objective and the goal, the strategy and skills, the vocabulary, how well they are doing, and what they need to do better next time. So our kids have changed. They have shorter attention spans, which some of you are parents or grandparents and understand that. It's about 7 to 10 minutes. And then they apply what they learn. They're visually preferred, so they need to see what they're learning. They want immediate gratification. So you talk about using short cycle challenge and feedback, and that's what our teachers are doing in the classrooms. They choose to be interactive and hands-on, so they're creating those challenges that use multiple neural pathways and cooperative learning situations. They love challenge and are curious, so you need to be explicit about objectives. They want to succeed using strategies, practice, and do-overs. So does that sound like any of your children or grandchildren, I'm sure? So it's very well researched. I mean, Robert Marzano and Pickering, and you've got all the big names that have been part of this initiative to create this. So our kids have changed, and it's time that we change with them. So when we talk about adoption of Common Core, and there are still some states out there, and one probably will not surprise you, the ones in orange have not yet adopted. So you can see that everyone is adopted other than those states in orange. Any questions on that slide? One of my concerns initially a couple of years ago was, Texas and California typically produce the textbooks. With Texas not adopting, what does that mean for us? Am I going to mess this up, Jen? That one. And I did.
Let's go back to
E on the bottom. The E.
No.
Go back to your E. There's multiple windows.
All the
here.
way down.
I'm not seeing it. I think I closed it. Hold on. Yeah, that's all right. There we go.
I didn't do it.
I told him not to shut my documents down, sorry. It's an inside joke. So we want to talk about grade levels and what's included in the Common Core. And so it's English, Language Arts, and we call it ELA, K through 12, and math. And social studies and science and the technical subjects are still going to be required to be part of this accountability because the reading and writing are critical skills. So there will be some responsibility on the social studies and science as well. And typically, you know that English, language arts, and math are typically always the ones that are held that have to be accountable because those are the ones that are tested the most. Science, the National Research Council and the National Science Teachers Association, and all of these organizations are working on science. I was told at a conference December, I just read something from the state board that said probably spring of 2013. So science will have some additional standards and have to go through and unpack those as well. So let's talk about PARC. So this is our assessment. So these are what PARC's commitment is that we're going to build a pathway, we're going to create high quality assessments. We're going to support the educators. We're going to make better use of technology in the assessments, so it'll be real time. Advance the accountability of all levels and be sustainable and affordable. I'm hoping they're right on that. So the states that are part of PARC. Now here's where this gets a little interesting when we talk about PARC and the assessment and how they're assessing the Common Core. Ugh. There are 23 states, I'm going to go, that's okay. There's 23 states that have adopted PARC, but the issue is going to be that there's 2 different consortiums that are working on the same set of standards. There's PARC and there's Smarter Balance. There are 8 states or 6 states that are members of both consortiums. And so both of these companies have received federal funding, and they're both designed to be performance-based and periodic assessments throughout the year. So they're saying this is what we guarantee you. Illinois is PARC. Some of the other states around us, like Alabama, Kentucky's part of both of them. They've chosen to be part of both of them. I don't know how they're going to manage which school does what test. So it's going to get very, very interesting. So with PARC, if we read this column, PARC, this is what they're offering. Now I'm going to be honest with you, this changes every time you see a presentation. They will have a diagnostic test and will be able to get the feedback immediately. So it will happen within the first 6 weeks of school. So that will give information to the teacher on where this child is at, each individual. Then there will be a mid-year assessment, and they're promising, once again, that that will be immediate results. So we're talking probably December. And then required testing, they're both saying, PARC is saying 9 through 11, and you'll see that Smarter Balance says something different. They're saying optional testing. And then it's interesting how both of them are going to figure out cut scores.
Jill, how does this compare with the MAP test that?
You know, there's a lot of comparison, and what's interesting about MAP, we had some training with MAP, and we actually are meeting 30 of us tomorrow to figure out how we're going to educate our staff. We're going to go to the MAP with Common Core and be able to test over Common Core so we can kind of see our curriculum gaps, and we're going to do that in the fall. I don't want to change right now. But they have a portion that it's over Common Core, so they'll be able to assess our kids on where the gaps are a year ahead of time, which that's what we would like to have that information. It's very similar.
And do we have to pay for PARC?
Well, as of right now, no. I will tell you that the PARC guy, when I was in Chicago at a conference, I asked him that and said, tell me, you're saying 4 tests. I've only heard that the state's going to pay for 2. And he said, you're probably right. He goes, so you'll end up paying for 2 as a district. So that's the problem. I don't know how affordable that's going to be.
And we have to do one of these 2? We
have to do PARC. We're required by PARC. But I want you to know that there are 2 consortiums out there, and some of the other states have adopted Smarter Balance, and I wish I could get that map to show up. Now, so here's what, and this is a draft. I'm putting draft on here. So diagnostic, they're saying it's going to be optional. And they're, you know, when the representative from PARC talked to the curriculum directors at LUDA, I mean, he said we have 18 months to put this all together. You know, it's not going to be multiple choice fill in the blank. It's multi-step problems. It's essay writing. It's projects. It's he said probably 1 and 2 will be you will have to pay as a district to take those optional ones, and then 3, 4, and 5 will be that the state will pick those up. Although 5, he's not real positive because they haven't even started developing it.
You said this was for 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. Okay.
Well, I mean it's 3 through 11. Mm-hmm.
Okay, 3 through 11.
Mm-hmm. So if I keep looking at the draft, they are going to have K2 optional formative assessments being developed. And like I said, they're starting to develop them in January. Then 3 through 8, they're going to give information about student achievement data. Plus, they're going to tell the parents and teachers who's on track for college and career readiness. And then 9th grade is going to talk about college and career determination and some interventions that need to take place quickly before they go to college. They're guaranteeing that with all of the grade levels 3 through 12, that there will be ongoing student supports and interventions.
They are guaranteeing they're going to provide intervention for our students.
They'll give you suggestions on what those interventions are. The company that's writing the test items is the same company that does ACT. It's ETS. And they said they've included targeted interventions and supports. I asked him to re-clarify that like you are doing. And
sorry,
there's going to be recommendations. There's going to have to be major professional development with this for teachers. I mean, they're talking about teacher module training on.
And who's going to pay for that? And when are the teachers going to do that?
That's what
I'm sorry, Jill.
I know.
I'm not. It's just.
We'll have to build it into our weekly professional development. You're going to have to. That's the only way we're going to get on top of this.
And what's the guarantee that this is going to be more effective than what we're currently doing?
Well, I would think it would, because you're not comparing apples to oranges. I mean, we're going to know. I mean, it should be easier, you know, it'll be equitable.
And it sounds like you're testing more frequently. So if we combine 5 times a year of that, which is not easy testing, plus 3 times a year math testing for our kids, plus the additional tests.
We had some of the same concerns sitting in that room.
So when do they learn?
They have
Probably
to
figure
sort
out to
this
2
out.
times a
you
year
see
from
some,
them.
you see some of this, some planning math testing, I mean, in a way.
I don't know. Depends on the information we get. Until we really see what all the information, and see that's kind of, we don't know yet. Now here's what I'm going to tell you though, and I know the coaches wanted me to for sure say this along with the principals. Because of the change with Common Core, you're going to see a dip in scores. And there are states such as Kentucky that have tested out and done some things with Park as a pilot, and they saw 1/3 of their scores go down.
But aren't they talking about changing the cut scores for
They are.
assets anyway?
They
Well,
are
I'm going to
this
talk about
coming
that
year.
in just a minute. So I
So
you know,
we'll
I
see that
want
in
to. So when we talk about dips, right off the press from ISB last week was that they're recalculating the ISAT performance expectations to align. So 20% of the 2013 ISAT for reading and math will be written to the Common Core standards. And so they're changing the cut scores. And this is their quote: the higher expectations of the new standards will likely result in a downward shift of where students rank in meeting or exceeding standards. This shift may be more significant than expected. They're not telling us what those cut scores are yet. I talked to Jim Palmer with ISB today, and he said, you know, we haven't released that yet.
And how does this all impact with No Child Left Behind? I mean, are we still having
Well,
to
there's
meet
more
AYP?
information about that and how the state has applied for waivers, and they're hoping to get those. So I'm just telling you, there's a lot of changes that we're trying to stay on. PSAE, there is no change because it's aligned to the ACT, so there's no significant changes at the high school level. This is their definition of college and career ready, and so I wanted to share this with you when I was in this session. And then there was a question in the room about will colleges accept it? And you know, the representative from Park said that the ACT and SAT are undergoing changes, and that ACT is actually developing an elementary version with Pearson. So it's interesting how everyone's trying to figure out how to develop and improve and sell their
You made an
product.
interesting comment when you started all this, Jill, when you talked about students from the East and the West who, usually take the SAT and not the ACT. Sounds like a really great way for a couple of companies to make a ton of money.
Well, there's a ton of money, billions. So, and then it talks about supporting educators, and this is where, when you go to their website, it talks about professional development modules and peer-to-peer training. So here's the key ingredients. So when we get down to it, our literacy coaches and instructional coaches have gone through some major training on Common Core. They're closest to the action on working with the teachers weekly during that professional development time, and a lot of them do it more than just that professional development time. It's some of that scheduled time that's outside their prep time. And so they're closest to the action, so they were the ideal people to go send to the training. And so they've been trained in all of this. They'll have completed all of this training in December. And I can tell you that when you look at our plan, this is going to be key about having those learning communities and having that time. I am concerned about not having enough time, to be honest with you.
Because every time you send these teachers off to be trained, then you've got to have subs in the classrooms, and the teachers aren't in the
Well, and
classrooms.
that's why it's great to send the coaches, because you don't need a sub for the coaches, and then they can come back and do that. So they've been very much very helpful in getting this done. Because then they're going to have teams of people. I mean, the principals and the coaches will work very closely together to get teams of people to start unpacking. So, the largest clog will be the whole professional learning. So we've got to get everyone to read the standards and start to unpack. So our timeline tentatively, and this could change, is going to be this. We were initially going to wait until January to roll out Common Core, and after rethinking it, we didn't really think that, the coaches and I didn't really think that January would be a great time to roll that out, after a 2-week break. So we've moved it up to December 6th, and the principals were nice enough to say, hey, you can take 40 minutes of that day and just do an overview, and we'll start unpacking. So this is our plan.
How does all this, we've worked so hard with our literacy initiative, and now we're initiating a numeracy initiative. How does all of this affect that?
That's what we've had to do some major scheduling, and there, we don't have an option.
There are some things that they've talked about that will evolve to the next steps, and some of those have actually started. It's interesting that they've started in conversations with teachers saying, okay, what's the next step for students that have mastered the comprehension strategies, and how do I challenge those students at that higher level, especially when you get up into GIS in the middle school, and they're starting to ask those questions themselves, and so it kind of dovetails well that it can evolve into a connection with the Common Core. And I think that's where Jill, when they unpack, she's going to see a lot, and the coaches will see a lot on what we do well, and then where are the gaps and what are our next steps, and the teachers, I think, will really see that there's a natural progression to the Common Core based on what we already know.
I mean, we've done a phenomenal job with our literacy initiative, and I did a lot of great things, and that's some of the things that I'm going to add to this PowerPoint for teachers, so they don't get the same questions that I'm going to include in their PowerPoint about we are ready for the next steps.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I have no doubt that our kids, I'm not worried about the kids, I'm worried about the amount of time they're going to be tested, the amount of time that the teachers have to learn something new, the cost, when we already have what we feel is a successful testing system in our district.
I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, do you have any questions? You have some of the same questions that
Sorry.
The poor guy, when he's sitting in that room, he didn't know what to do.
The poor guy is being paid by them?
It was kind of relentless. So anyway,
Don't feel too sorry.
I wanted more answers. So, any questions on that? I know some of you went to some sessions, so. Okay.
Thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Jill. All right, on to item 10, our financials, and next is our tax levy, our 2012 tax levy presentation.
Tonight is this is a preliminary, so like the budget, where we bring it to you in 2 phases. This is the preliminary levy information. So we'll give a little background. This is part of our overall budget cycle. So we're in November, where we're establishing levy and estimates, and then you can see the timeline for the rest of the year. In April, we'll get the verification from the county. We'll know what the EAV actually is and what the rates will actually be and what we're eligible for. Just a reminder that this is part of the overall annual yearly budget process that pretty much runs throughout the year. We are in PTEL, property tax extension limit, so we're under the, we're tax cap in the county, and so just remember that. which means that we're capped, no matter how much the EAV grows, we're capped to what we can request, no more than 5%, or the lesser of 5%, or what CPI is. And CPI, I'll talk about here in just a second. And when you're looking at this, remember we're going to look at the extension, which is the dollar amounts. So pay attention to the dollars that are being requested, because the rates will fluctuate based on what the final EAV is calculated, and then it will, the county will go through and tell you what the rate actually is. So what you're really focusing here on is, well, I don't want the rate in the ed fund to be this. We have caps that we're allowed to go up to in certain funds, so we have to just know that, but you're looking at the dollar amounts. We're looking at our total dollars, what are we asking for, and within the guidelines of being in PTEL. This is our request for tax dollars, and we're requesting the amount not knowing what the EAV is going to be because the county hasn't done their assessment yet. So we're a little ahead of it's just the way the system always works. So just for our chart, you can see where the CPI has fallen in the last 10 years, and we know this year it's 3%. So up from last year, which is good, still below the 5%. So within the limits again of PTEL, we know that the maximum we can request is actually going to be at the 3% limit. The EAV growth from year to year, comparing the dollars as they've grown from year to year in this last 10 years, from 02 to 03, 04, up through 11, the data that we have shows that we're still hovering even in the last few years around the 3 to 4% range in growth. And we know there's holes in the ground. We see the construction going in. We see new construction for housing. We see commercial going in. So all signs continue to point that the EAV will continue to grow. And remember too that when it can be almost 2 years from when a structure is completed until you can actually tax the full amount on that. So it can be almost 2 years.
Is that calendar?
Calendar year.
Calendar year as opposed to fiscal year?
Yeah, it is. It's based on the assessment as of January 1 of that year. So, example, we see Menards has broken ground. They've a long way into their construction, but it's nowhere near open. So January 1, 2013 is going to come, and that facility is not going to be open. It may open, say, later in 2013, but it won't hit the tax books until January of 2014. So when we're here in November of 2014 asking for this levy, that's the first time we're predicting that that amount of money would be on the books because it would be taxed in 2015. So there's your 2 years. So it'll be a while. So what we have before you tonight is basically two scenarios. So we're looking for the board's direction, which way you'd like to go. Since we're in PTEL, there's truth in taxation, which says we can exceed a request that's greater than 5% of last year's dollars, excluding the bond and interest amount, because that's going to be automatically set. So if we ask for more, our increase in our levy, we're going to be more than 5% of what we received last year, we can request that, but we have to have a hearing. So if you would authorize that higher dollar amount, which is the bottom there, then we would have to post it in the newspaper that we're going to have a hearing, and in December you would set the date of your December board meeting as the hearing date, similar to our budget hearing. We would hold an actual hearing, present the numbers, and then you would go for approval. If we stay under that 5%, then you don't have to have the official hearing. So since we're capped at no more than 5% or the lesser of CPI, and this year we know the cap is 3%, and we don't expect our EAV growth to even go really much more than 3 or 4%, I don't see asking for higher than 5%. I think we're going to capture everything that we're due in this coming year. So the proposal is that we would request no more than 4.99% of total extension, knowing that we may not get that full amount, of $24,730,000, which is just under 5% of what we received, greater than what we received last year. So therefore, you would not have to request a hearing.
It's the higher of the two, 5% of CPI?
Lower.
So they're only going to give us 3% anyway?
Excluding new property.
Excluding new property. So if
So
there's
we
a
get
potential that the new
4.9%.
property was going to exceed and we thought we were going to grow, say, 8%, and then there was going to be some more money there, we want to make sure we've captured all of it we're eligible for. We might have an opportunity to go above the 5%, but the numbers this year are not pointing to us needing to request that much because there's not going to be that. There's not going to be there. To be safe, you could authorize us to go out and say we'd like to ask for $25 million as the example there. That's 7% more than we received last year, and we can have a hearing, ask for that much, and then the numbers will come in the spring, and they'll be much closer to or below even the $24 million. So you can. It doesn't hurt us to ask for more, but the way the data is looking, it doesn't appear that we would even be that high anyway. So to avoid the hearing, there's no need for it based on the projections, so you wouldn't need to, but you certainly have that ability if you want.
Last year we used that half, 4
Last year, that's the way we went last year. Yep.
With the 4.99.
Yep.
And how did that work out?
Close, but again, we didn't exceed the 5% extension from the year before. It was closer to about 3%. Even with the 1.5 CPI limit, even with the new growth, we still were only about 3%. So we're asking for almost 5% more, knowing that it's probably going to be closer to 3 or 4% actual. So you've got a little you've got a little cushion there anyway. We certainly can ask for more to feel safer, but my recommendation is it doesn't, but we can go either way. Just to let you know how the EAV is determined, it's broken down into the different categories: residential, farm, commercial, industrial, mineral, and railroad. And you can see the first column there is the actual dollar amounts from this year's assessment, totaling the $645 million. That's what was total EAV. Of that EAV, the new property was just under $15 million this year. And that percent increase from the previous year, that compares that to how that grew from the year before, which that number's not on there, but you can see the percent increase. So that railroads a larger, where residential, farm have gone up, industrial stays about the same, mineral really stays the same. But you can see an overall growth there was only 2.92%. We estimated last year on our levy, again, the 4.99, and it came in at 2.92. So this year's estimate, we said, is we're projecting capping it at 4.99, using that as our base, assuming it wouldn't go higher than that based on what we're seeing, what the trends are. We're even estimating, we're still seeing residential growth, so estimating maybe it's 5%. Seeing farmers continue to show some growth. So you can see what those estimates are to get us to that number. And new property is still showing slight growth again from the previous year. Could be more, but again, we'd be eligible for all of that regardless. So here's your recommendation. The 11 rate and extension are the first two columns. Again, that's what we actually received this previous taxing cycle. And then the 12 rate is in red and green. Again, the rate is just there to let you know, based on this estimate, what the rate could be. The rates will change, but the dollar amounts are what we're actually asking. That's what we actually will file on our certificate of levy with the county, saying here's the dollar amount. We won't say we want 2.66% in the ed fund. No, we're going to say we want 18 million in the ed fund. So we file the dollar amount. So that's what's important to notice. So you'll see the reason I highlight the IMRF and Social Security is just to let you know that really that's a fund. That's our Fund 50. It's really a combined fund. It's two separate lines on the levy, but it's really one fund. So I just want you to notice that. And then the bond and interest, I highlight that because that's an automatic amount that gets applied by the county for us. We have no control over that. That's already been set. And as you saw earlier in the presentation from Ann Noble, that's a dollar amount that's preset based on bonds we've already sold. The far right shows whether this is an increase or decrease from the year before's request. So in the ed fund, for example, we're asking for nearly $2 million more in that particular fund. Some of the other funds we're asking for less to offset where we think we need the money more in this coming year based on our fund balances. And sorry, it's kind of off the bottom of there a little bit, but the total projection here is that the rate would be just slightly under at 4.34, based on last year's 4.35 actual. So we're still estimating that even with the increased request, we can keep the tax rate basically flat from what it was last year, or this, this most recent taxing cycle. So what does that mean for a homeowner? So here's an example. If you had, in 2011, based on the actual amount that was taxed, if you had a $100,000 home, remember they're assessed at a third of the value, so that's $33,333. Most will qualify for a homestead exemption. So that's the next line. That's taking the homestead exemption off, which is $5,000. So now their home is assessed at $28,333, and they applied that rate, the 4.35. They applied that, and just on that part of your tax bill, it came to $1,232.56. This year, using the assumptions of the numbers we just showed you, there's actually be a $1.79 decrease on your tax bill for this particular item. So, questions? I have another document before you make your. I don't want to close. Well, we did.
Close it.
Somebody closed my document. That's okay. And I apologize, didn't make it to the board docs, but we will get it up there, so it'll be public after this. This is the, that one example on that slide is just at $100,000. This is breaking them out into smaller increments. Again, using the 10 2 years ago, the 11 this most recent year, and then the 12 proposed, just so you can see, based on where your home falls approximately in that chart, what that rate was and how it grew or decreased from year to year, just for comparison purposes. And we'll make sure this is up there probably by tomorrow on board docs for everyone to see also. But that's again,
you're looking at the bottom red line then is what you're looking at.
The bottom
right?
red line is a negative, indicating that that's a decrease proposed from the most recent tax bill, just for the education part of the levy, of your taxes. There are other items on your tax bill that we have no control over.
But to clarify, in good faith, our best estimates, if we kind of follow this, is that thankful for the increase in the EAV.
Yes.
If this all falls into place,
right,
that the homeowner is going to actually have a slight decrease in the school district part of his
potential. Yes, that's right. Yeah, based on this estimate, and we won't know that until the spring, but based on what we're requesting, even assuming there was a full 5% growth, which I don't think there will be, this is what the of what we're asking. Remember, we're going to ask for that full amount. We balloon levy, so we ask for more than we're going to receive. They're going to come back and say, well, the EAV really came in at this, and then it recalculates proportionally each of those lines. We have an option then, actually, when it comes back to say, here's what it was. Do you want to now shift any more dollars to one line or another? You still have a maximum that we're going to be eligible for. So proportionately, the total line stays the same, but within each fund, we'll have an opportunity to tweak if we want to request yet a slight higher, because we just really need that here, and we could request less in another one, which would keep the total, again, the total dollar amount would still be the same. So we have an option to, or an opportunity to make that change before the final levy is applied. It won't change the rate at that point, it will just change which fund we're actually getting money in. So if we want a little more in the ed fund after the final numbers come out, or we need a little more in, say, the IMRF fund, for example, once we know the final numbers, we have the option to do that. So it'll come in less than what we're actually asking for. So hopefully you would recommend tonight that we go forward with the less than 5% scenario. And if you want to go higher, we can. I'll just put together some different numbers that break out, and we'll have the hearing as part of the December board meeting. I just need to know so we can post or not post a newspaper announcement.
This is
then if we buy some bonds, we can hedge the referendum and make some money, right?
Say that again.
Buy some bonds.
Oh, buy some bonds.
We buy our own bonds.
You just hedge the referendum, and now we can make some money, right?
Well, not quite.
Again, here's the two scenarios.
That's an and question.
Yeah,
ask Ann how that works.
asking you to consider. The numbers that you saw were based on, of course, the 4.99% for each line. Those are the numbers that I presented to you in this document.
You're not looking for formal action tonight. You're looking for that.
I do need action for you
it was posted
for the board to give me an indication of which of these recommendations. And if there was I only provided you with two. Obviously, you say, well, I don't want to go 4.99. We want to go 6, and I gave you an option of 7. If you wanted to choose another number, you're certainly welcome to. I proposed these two options.
Posted without action.
Yeah.
But just for clarity, 4.99 will give us the money we need, should we be able to get that much, which we won't.
I don't anticipate, nothing is pointing to it growing high enough for us to actually, if we requested 7% growth, the 25 million, the numbers are still not going to come in less than that.
Less than 4, or less than 4 point.
So
Less than 5 anyway.
have we, or when was, if we have, the last time we've been over that 5%?
Sure, right here. So you had 8% growth in 05, 6, and 7.
Yeah.
And so I think you had truth in taxation hearings back then.
Right, there were hearings.
Yeah. And again, all that was just saying we're exceeding 5% request more than what we received the year before, which is okay because we anticipated, or you saw, or there were some indications that there was more growth that were going to be on the books at that time.
But if you look at that compared to the CPI,
Right.
for example, in what, 8, wasn't it down to 1 or 9?
0.1.
Yeah, 1/10 of 1%.
Right.
So really, we can request it, but you're still not
Right.
going to get it.
Right. Except for if in the new growth. Now, if we knew there was a lot of new growth, such as a Menards, or some of the Shields, or if there were some other larger items that we knew were absolutely on the books for sure, but they're not on the books right now.
Yeah.
they're coming, we know they're coming, but they're not officially in the books for us to get the full tax EAV on that.
Well then, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we,
Okay.
levy at 4.99%.
Okay.
Or,
Yes.
is it the right levy?
Yes, that's right.
Yep.
Yep. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions?
Okay, but add that last year our estimate was we were gonna decrease the property tax burden by about 1 or 2 pennies.
Mm-hmm.
Or
It was very
something
close,
like that.
very minimal.
And we actually increased it by 1 or 2.
It actually went the other way. So until the final numbers come out,
Right.
that's why the rate can change. It's the dollar amounts that we're asking for. And we have no control over, obviously, the rates, but we have control over how much we're asking for. And the assumption and the estimates are based in this model is that if it came out this full amount, yes, your rates could actually go down. If it comes down less, the rate could change a little bit. Because remember, some of that will be will be on the
But
bond
this
interest.
isn't a hopeful, so this is just your best assumption.
Right.
Yes.
But it seems to be relatively flat. You shouldn't see a large spike,
Just
even
hope
if the dollar amounts come in less.
Local press picks that up. Trying
Okay.
to decrease the tax burden.
We have a motion and a second. Anything else? Betsy, we call the roll, please?
Yes, Carter.
Yes.
Cobb.
Yes.
Carly.
Yes.
Butter.
Yes.
Weitzel.
Yes.
And Eustace.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Let's see what's next on here. On to new business, 11.1, our FY14 budget reductions.
Budget reductions are always a very difficult conversation regardless of what you're looking at cutting, especially when you're talking about personnel, especially when you're talking about positions that people hold. And on this attachment, you can see that there have been some things, oh, okay, there it goes. There have been some things that in the past, on the right-hand side, we put the reduction year so that you can see that there have been some things that we've done in the past. In fact, Chad alluded tonight to the fact that he, with the setup of his system, or the network, he was able to not replace a technology assistant. And I remember asking Chad over and over, are you sure you don't need someone? He's probably one of the busiest people in the district and runs on a constant basis, and every now and then sits down to, I think, check emails, but otherwise he's going. And so we asked, do you need to replace this position that Ryan Stalitz, when he moved on, left? And Chad has said over and over that no, because of the way that the virtual network is set up, that he felt confident that he could still do the same amount of work without one less person. So over the past couple of years, especially this year, we've really tried to cut back on things that are ancillary, such as building budgets, supplies, those types of things. We've really tried to reduce down. It's difficult sometimes to put a number to things because it varies from year to year, and it can be such as trinkets or things. It's kind of varies on what we've used in the past. So if you move visually down to tonight's recommendation is that you eliminate two positions that, like I said, it's very difficult when we get to this point that we start talking about positions because there are people that are attached to it, and that becomes a difficult conversation. But really the reduction in state funding has left us really no alternative other than to start talking about salary savings. We've already, this past spring, and I don't have it listed, but this past spring we increased class sizes at many of our elementary classrooms, and there were a few retirements that we did not fill based on attrition. And so we've done a little bit in terms of trying to reduce the impact of our salaries to the budget by increasing class sizes. We're at a point that we're not comfortable increasing class sizes anymore beyond that point, and we've heard directive from the board, and we feel strongly that the best the way to make reductions is to try to have minimal impact directly to students. And so tonight's recommendation is that we eliminate the two positions that are listed, the GHS associate principal position and the GMS assistant principal position. And that those job responsibilities, what we're looking for is positions that job responsibilities could be absorbed with the remaining administration.
question.
will be absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
Could be, they will be.
Will
Yes.
be.
Any other questions?
My question would be, how's the staffing at our high school principal positions compared to a typical high school of kind of that size in the state? Is our currently, and then if we make this change, are we understaffed compared to comparable high schools?
On a ratio, I don't know
Or about
offhand.
the same?
Right, I don't know offhand. We were looking more at job responsibilities and what could be absorbed, so rather than looking at ratios.
Because my other comment would be even more pertinent for the middle school. We know we've got, our middle school has been reduced slightly.
To 2 grade levels.
To 2 grade levels instead of 3. So on the one hand, that's a slight reduction in responsibilities already. At the same time, we know we've got a large 8th grade class and a large 7th grade class in one single building. I mean, it's probably the 5th or 6th largest 8th grade class in one single building in downstate. So,
well, you know, and I think it speaks to what's ideal, and unfortunately in these state funding, you know, in the times, the climate that we have in state funding and the future that we know we're headed to, we can't be ideal anymore. I mean, these are, you know, nice to have. It's nice to have these positions, and you know, we would like to still continue to have them, but you know, knowing that we're going to have to tighten our belts as much as possible. It's, you know, they're tough things to have to do. These are tough conversations to have, and none of us want to approach it, but it's something that, you know, if we're going to balance a budget, there's no way to approach it other than to make those tough decisions. And you know, rather than kind of looking for what's the ideal, we're looking for where can we absorb some of the job responsibilities and make sure that students' needs are still met and consolidate.
This is all driven by our expected decrease in reimbursements from the state. Obviously not from our taxpayer, from our local taxpayers, because that tax burden is in great shape.
Absolutely. It's really about, our general state aid was prorated last year, or for this school year, at an 89% of the previous year. You know, when you look at over time, you have increases in salaries, you have increases in expenses, and you know, there's just not much you can do in terms of continuing to pay for things when your state funding is decreased. We do know that there will be a pension shift, a pension obligation shift. We just don't know what it will be yet. We assume that it will be something that we'll know more about after the lame duck session in January, and there's potential for it to be stepped in over you know, 12 to 14 years, depending on, you know, what it might look like, and we know that it could be potentially, you know, shifted a little bit at a time. But we also are hearing more about another proration of our general state aid that may look worse next year than it does this. And we always kind of had that gut feeling that this year, this fiscal year, was going to be difficult, but next fiscal year is going to be even worse. And we've seen, you know, what has already occurred in our ed fund reserves, and that we, you know, when we presented last month, Patrick presented that information that our ed fund is being depleted at a very fast rate. We know that with that, coupled with the fact that the general state aid is being prorated and the pension shift may make a huge difference to our budget as well. It's just a really, it's a very scary time for a district, and the only way to approach that is to be as conservative as possible and make tough decisions that we don't want to have to make, but we're forced to make because of state funding.
Good question about the million reduction right on the top line. Is that something we carry over here? Is that just something that, or does some of that have to come back because we put off supplies that are going to...
Some of it, I mean, you know, when you look at, like Jill talked about putting off another textbook adoption, we've already done that for, you know, several years, and she's right, we're going to have to do that again. But how long can you put off adoptions? And, you know, it comes to a point where we're going to have to start looking at, you know, especially social studies books, or, you know, some of those types of things. Obviously, we're going to look at online resources that are constantly updated, but it's difficult to keep putting those decisions off. And when what happened was, and what I didn't really reflect here, but we have to remember that we've had a reduction, obviously, in our general state aid, which is pretty much, you know, what we rely on as a district. But we've also had reductions over the past several years on, since I've been here anyway, we've had our reading improvement block grant was completely slashed, and that was $100,000 plus that paid for reading coaches or reading interventionists. We had our Illinois textbook loan program that gave us thousands and thousands of dollars every year for textbooks. When we would adopt a new textbook, we would use that, $80,000+ to refurbish our textbooks or leveled library books. And we were able to capture those, but they've all been completely slashed from the state budget. So it's not just a general state aid issue, that we've had these reductions over the years of, those smaller, what you might think of as smaller in terms of our budget, grants, and they were state funded grants, but they're still very big because we've continued to have, when we slashed, when they completely cut our reading improvement block grant, we continued to have those literacy interventionists because we felt like that was something that directly impacts students and our most at-risk students as well. And so we as a district, pre-K is another really good example. We've had pre-K slashed. We've had threats of not having pre-K in the future. And so it became a competitive grant from a formula grant that we were always just given based on our student population. We had to start competing for that grant last year. And fortunately we did get funding, but we've said as a district, these are things that we think are important. And we've tried to maintain those, but at a difficult level, because then we just keep eating more of those costs. Transportation is a really good example as well, when you see those reductions. And so it's not just the general state aid that we talk about constantly, but it's more than that. It's the impact of the fact that we've continued to have these things that we feel like we've committed to our community, pre-K and literacy intervention and transportation. And those are things that we've really committed and continued to maintain as a district because we can. But now we're getting to a point where we have to start having some really tough conversations about what can we afford and what can't we. What's nice to have, but what can we afford? And it's tough, but it's time that we start having those really difficult conversations. So this is really just a first pass at those tough conversations. And like I said, we don't want to have to do them. We don't want to have to tell two people that have done well for our district that are part of our team. Our administrative team, we feel like that's a very difficult thing to have to tell them, that we simply can't afford your position. You haven't done anything wrong, but we simply can't afford to maintain this position any longer. And that's a very difficult conversation, probably the most difficult conversation I've ever had in terms of being in this position or in my previous position, because it's hard to say to somebody that hasn't done anything wrong that we just can't afford your position anymore. And so it'd be easy if somebody was retiring. You could just say we're gonna lose that based on attrition, but that's not the case in these two positions. So it would be an honorable release, but still a difficult conversation.
So we're looking at what, $1.2 million, $1.3 million here. What's a conservative number that we're going after?
See, and that's still a moving part. We're talking about obviously a need for more. However, there are still questions, and we want to buy a little bit of time, because in January we'll know more about the potential for the pension shift. We're hoping that in the lame duck session we'll know more about what that pension obligation shift might look like. Hopefully, we'll know a little bit more about what the potential for a proration of general state aid might be. It's not likely that we'd know that early, but we know that in January we're gonna come back with some more things. But we're really trying to look at things such as what is our levy going to look like, and what's our gut say in terms of all of these variables that are still out there, to know what our budget will be and be able to balance it and be back in the black. So I don't have an answer just yet, but we're working on one.
Any other questions, comments? If not, then need a motion then to approve our budget reductions as presented in your board packet this evening.
Nobody wants their name on that. But I'll move that we accept
Okay.
it. We don't really have a choice. BCA has been involved in this, in the reduction,
Discussions.
discussion, the reduction discussions.
They were involved more so in like the class size conversation, and we're trying to involve them. And it's difficult to have people too involved in conversations, because again, there are faces attached to those types of decisions, and so it's tough to have. We didn't survey, or we didn't necessarily have a vote, but it's, you know, we did try, especially in class size reductions, we had some conversation about what's realistic when we did, when class size increase, not reduction, class size cap increase, when we did all of that conversation, which has been a positive influence on our budget. But it's been tough, and they've taken on, more students in their classrooms at the elementary levels and done a very nice job, but it is an increase.
Thank you, Linda. I need a second, please.
It's very difficult to separate my feelings for the people in this position and to know that it's the right decision for the district at this time. I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Betsy, call the roll, please.
Yes. Weitzel.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Cobb.
Yes.
Harley.
Yes.
Butter.
Yes.
And Nucis.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Next we have 11.2, some bids for door replacement. Mr. Murphy.
Good evening. I'm here to talk about the approved bids for door hardware tonight. We're recommending to accept the Harold O'Shea Builders bid for $81,520 for base bid and all alternates. The reason for the bids were to replace certain doors and door hardware at the high school. We've got certain doors that have failed to the point that we have to keep them locked, and that's not appropriate. We've got hardware issues. The doors are not opening properly, and it's time after 13 years to renovate. The bid package went out. We did have 8 bidders respond, and Harold O'Shea was the lowest bidder, including all alternates, for $81,520. We are recommending those folks tonight, as they are the low bidder.
How many doors are we talking about? Is it the entrance to the high school? The two
We're talking about the main entrance doors, east and west side of the high school, renovating those doors, athletic doors. They get a lot of use. All the doors that get a lot of use in the commons area, gymnasium area, renovating those doors in particular, auditorium doors also.
So they're not all exterior doors, some of them are interior?
Not all exterior doors, no. Just the doors that get a lot of usage. Any questions?
They're giving us a 15-year guarantee.
Sorry.
They get a 15-year guarantee.
We only got 13 out of the last set, so although we are using a better grade of material this time.
Everybody bid the same. There's a big, there's about, what, $50,000 discrepancy
pretty good
there.
Swing. We had
Or not
various
discrepancy,
disciplines bid the work. There's a lot of hungry people out there right now.
Yeah, but you can see the people on the bottom just put out a round number. I don't know how closely they looked at it.
And our estimate was right in the middle. So, and the reason we put it out in 2 alternates in the base bid was to make sure that we didn't go over. By the way, the majority of the funding came from my maintenance grant. It's not from the state.
Any other questions? Motion then to approve the Harold O'Shea Builders as recommended by administration tonight. Thank you, John. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Alan. Call the roll, please.
Carter.
Yes.
Cobb.
Yes.
Harley.
Yes.
Butter.
Yes.
Weitzel.
No, I'm sorry. No.
Okay.
And Nucis.
Yes. Okay. Next item we have is 11.3, school calendar amendment.
We need to amend next year's calendar for 2013-14. So that's you want to go ahead and open it. We knew this was going to happen, and I put that in the paragraph to describe it. We had set a calendar when the calendar team met last year. We decided that we were going to try to have parent-teacher conferences about the 8th week of instruction versus the end of September. And when I surveyed the teachers, out of 205 of them, 70.7 said they loved it. I got the calendar team back together, and we started looking at calendar dates, and we decided that we wanted to go ahead and move it 1 week later and try to avoid that holiday due to the feedback we got from the surveys that because the week that we had conferences was the same week that we had that holiday, that Monday holiday, we had a lot of teachers having to schedule outside of parent-teacher conference days. So this would be the best of both worlds, is just move it to October. And then we did think of homecoming, and so we called Dan Rourke, and Mr. Rourke reported that he's looking at the 27th as being homecoming game. And then I talked with the coaches, and they always help give input on when to do those half school improvement days, and those have not been set, and we set all of those days. So this is the earliest we've had an official calendar that we can, give out to our community. And we do get a lot of calls about, can you put all your days on this calendar? Because a lot of people plan around this calendar. So all the days are on there. So, and then we did look at other surveying about should we have night conferences, and 65% of the teachers, about 66% said no. They only had 19% of all the parents that came through say that they couldn't take time off due to work obligations. So we did, it's always one of those questions that, Linda's shaking her head. We always kind of wonder, and so we surveyed the teachers. It was a 5-question survey, so to see what they thought and what we should do. So we have data now. Any other questions?
One of the things that I know I've talked about with Carrie and previous to that too is how many full weeks of class we have, or we don't have, I guess, in a year. And it's very evident up there that we have got, in most months we have 2 weeks, we have 10 days out of 20 days where we have, we have 2 full weeks in any month. And I look at those half-day school improvements, and that versus teacher institute days. Is there explain to me what the difference in?
You'd have to bank your
those.
time. It would probably be possible.
Have to what?
We'd have to bank some time with going over and banking that time for the state guidelines. But part of it is, and we've talked about, should you have full day or half day?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is how productive is a full day?
Well,
the half days are pretty productive.
A half day productive for who? The kids or the school improvement?
For the school improvement.
Well, I understand that, but how productive is a half day for the kids, for the students?
We don't waste a lot of time on those days.
Those are what, half-hour periods then? 25-minute periods?
25 minutes, I would say, 25 at the middle school, high school.
And you were saying earlier we've got, your attention span issues that we have. It just looks, we're doing it because we don't want to go past a certain date at the end of the year, and those days, those half days count as a instruction day. Am I correct in that?
Correct.
So basically, if we took those and made them full days, we'd have to go however many days there are there, 6-7 days further out.
The only thing is, from a professional development standpoint, wherever you're going to put those, it makes it a little bit harder because you do need some of those days at the end of the year, those half days to wrap up things, to figure out what summer work needs to be done. I would hate to just move it into 3 days.
I'm not saying you move it into 3 days. I'm saying that I think we have to look at not only what's best for the teachers and what they need to do, and they do need the professional development, and they do need those days, but how much instruction time, real instruction time, do you have in a 25-minute period like that? Getting in, getting out. You really, that's always been my question, is to how valuable it is to have a half day of school like that. How productive is it? Yes. And I'm not looking for an answer, Jill. That's always been something that I've had questions on.
And we administratively had talked about that those would have to be productive, very productive days.
Because
for example, the calendar
staff,
team would
or-
love for the elementary principals, perfect example. They feel like that October 31st is a great day to have the fall parties because it falls on Halloween and we do fall parties. They would rather the fall party happen that day instead of the
And be done with
25th
it,
because
yeah.
then you mess up with 2 days. So they're all, I mean, the calendar team talked about, you know, this would be really beneficial if you can convince the elementary principals, Mrs. Larson, to try to have, even though it's on a Halloween, to have those fall parties because you lose a lot of time with parties at K4. So I mean, we were talking about that exact same thing. So and I understand your question. So
it's, I was in the high school for a presentation on one of those half days, and it was a zoo that day, or for a little bit. At least while we were there, it was not very organized, and it. I don't know if that's the way it is all the time. I'm sure it's not, but it just seems to me that it would be better for student instruction to have it be. If you're going to have school, have it all day as opposed to a half a day. So, thank you. I don't know if there's any other comments or questions.
That's a good point, something to look at.
Is it
any other questions?
that decision about a half day versus a whole day? Who makes that decision? I mean,
Then the calendar committee can. We've just always historically had the teacher institutes at the points in the year where they are the full day, and then the half days we've allowed to sprinkle across, across the other months. And really, like for example, we had our coaches, our literacy coaches, determine where those would be based on their refreshers that they needed to provide for each strategy before the month started. And so, sprinkling them across, it's just kind of historically what we've done. There's no rhyme or, necessary reason for why we have, the full at the beginning, at the end, other than, kicking off the school year and letting people work in their classrooms and prepare, and then, end is obviously closing things up, but there are a couple others sprinkled throughout, like the Monday in January is a full day.
But it's a reasonable question. We're kind
It
of
is.
looking into it. This is our status quo. I hadn't thought about it when Jim brought it up, but I mean, would it be more productive for the kids to have a full day and then
It might be something you want to survey teachers about too, and
I could survey the teachers
before the
when we do calendar
calendar
committee
for the next year.
Absolutely, it's worth talking about to see what their opinions are on it.
Consolidate one of those,
Absolutely, we could
There's
do
just a lot of
a
things that
combination.
happen during those half days. With Common Core implementation, I wouldn't recommend changing it, but I think for 2014, 15, absolutely, we could look at surveying teachers and getting input.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, then need a motion then to approve the amended school calendar for 2013-2014 as presented this evening.
Move.
Thank you, Steve. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Alan. Call the roll, please, Betsy.
Cobb?
Yes.
Harley?
Yes.
Wetter?
Aye.
Weitzel?
yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Deuces?
Yes. Next item is approve a GHS speech team trip for December 7th and
Lee?
8th.
Do you want to tell us where your kids are going?
Really, it's just about going out of state, across the state lines. They go this every year. It's a great tournament, but it does involve across state lines. It's, the majority of it's funded by the boosters, speech boosters, so just a matter of getting approval because they will cross state.
Where do they go?
Western Kentucky University.
By policy, we have them have it approved here before going.
And then they follow the guidelines for supervision.
Meals.
Not meals yet. Not yet on meals.
Steak and lobster this year.
Steak and lobster this year. Yeah. Peanut butter and jelly next year.
Okay, there are no questions, no other questions. Need a motion then to approve the speech team out-of-state trip to Western Kentucky University on December 7th and 8th this year. Thank you, John. And a second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. Call the roll, please.
Harley?
Yes.
Wetter?
Yes.
Weitzel?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Cobb?
Yes.
Deuces?
Yes. Next item we have is roundtable discussion, 12-1.
We need 2 members to serve on a social media policy action team, 2 board members, and so we're seeking volunteers. Rick's not here, you can volunteer him.
Just 1 or 2, correct?
I think 2 would be better. Yeah. Betsy's going to lead that. Betsy and Jill are going to lead that.
I'll do that. That's
Anybody else?
Planning a meeting?
No, not yet. It will be after the holidays.
I mean, just in terms of evenings or?
Most likely evenings. We'll look at the committee members and see what works best for them.
I could do something evenings wise.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Betsy's already started doing some groundwork in terms of, you know, what other districts are doing, so. Good, thank you.
Good, thanks.
I understand if they still use social media.
And then, as I mentioned earlier, board members attended a conference in Chicago last week. Was it last week? 2 weeks, or a week and a half,
Before
whenever it was.
Thanksgiving.
Weekend before Thanksgiving. And I don't know if anybody would want to talk about any of the sessions that attended and that sort of thing. As I mentioned earlier, one of the sessions that I attended was that technology session, and found it to be most helpful, and was not pleasantly surprised, but I was not concerned. I just wanted to make sure where we were going with things, and when Chad and I talked about it, it's exactly where we're headed, and exactly I think where a lot of the schools in the state are headed these days. So, and we've got things in place now to implement that. It's just a matter of timely implementation. So.
Well, I had a really interesting experience, and I'd like to recognize Mr. Bandy back there because due to his kids' hard work and his supervision and Mr. Guimar's hard work, our board made a little bit of school board history while we were there. We had submitted a resolution last summer. Maybe not a big deal. It's certainly not a big deal compared to some of the other things we've talked about this evening, but we submitted a resolution to ask for show choir. Let me back up. The School Board Association sets its legislative agenda based on resolutions submitted by school boards, which then go to a committee, and the committee approves or denies, and then that approvals and denials go in front of a representative from every school board who chooses to attend. In this case, this year there were 360. Our initial resolution, which we submitted to the committee, was denied last summer. I appealed that decision. Mr. Bandy and Mr. Guimar's kids put together an amazing video, and Jim and Carrie and Steve and I presented in front of the resolutions committee, and the first time in their history they overturned a decision that they had made previously. So it was pretty interesting experience. And then the next day, Jim and I went to the delegate assembly, although only one person is able to.
I'm just spectator.
And where it was brought up, and then we spoke again, or I spoke, and then it was approved. So it's kind of an interesting experience. It was a
dynamite. I tell you, I think
Yeah.
Lisa's downplaying a little bit.
She's very humble.
With the work that she put in, and everybody who supported her on this in the district. It was a phenomenal job. Like Lisa said, it's the first time in the years that the ISB has been in existence, and through probably thousands of resolutions that have been both approved and denied, this is the first time that one has ever been, that it's been reversed after they denied the resolution. So it just goes to show that we were on the right side. You were on the right side, and it's. You told me it was show choir. It's a PE waiver for show choir participants, and it's only for districts that have show choir as an accredited course, and then they have to do some other things in there and competitions and that sort of thing. So, but
yes, yeah. Although I understand.
What are the chances of this then passing through the state legislature?
Well, it's interesting. I thought the biggest hurdle would be what we've already gone through, but amazingly enough, there's quite a PE lobby, I understand. However, where I work now, I've got a little bit of help. So that was just the first half of the battle. We'll
But she's on her way to changing law, which is really powerful.
Yes, we'll see.
On behalf of our students, I thank you, because that's quite an advocacy that you've set up for them, and to advocate for them to not just waive out of PE, and you know, that seems like a simple thing, but they're using that time to take courses that, you know, AP Chem courses or whatever, you know, that they may not be able to take otherwise, because they're able to have that room, that flexibility in their schedule. And somebody brought up at the resolutions committee, brought up that, you know, we would, this board member said, we would like to have a show choir, but we can't because we have a block schedule. And there is no time in their day for something like this. And while it would be a great thing for students, and we know, and you know, in Ball-Chatham, we know how great it is for students, that they have that avenue to express themselves, but she said there's no way that they can do it because of the block schedule. And this would open up the ability for the board to make a decision about whether or not they would like to have students waive out of PE because they're in something like this, similar to what they can do for marching band. So Lisa is one step closer to changing the law, and it's exciting to watch it.
Good job.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody and the other districts in the state, because I did. There were other.
Lisa Weitzel Act. I think she should have her name on it.
Yeah. Well, there were other districts in the state who stood with us. So.
You did a great job.
Anything else you want to add? Okay. It was all downhill after that, right? After that one,
well, it took like the entire weekend.
It did.
Like.
It did.
A lot of work.
Anything else anybody want to share?
I'll add that I was appreciative for the opportunity. There's a lot of good stuff.
It's an opportunity. Yeah, opportunity to go up there and take a look and see what other districts are doing, and that's another session I sat in, was a board presidents roundtable to see how other boards operate and how the board presidents operate within the realm of their board also, and it's gone to that the last 2 years, and it's eye-opening, and I thank everybody for the board that we've got here.
Made you appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I always have done that, but just that much more. So it's quite an eye-opener sometimes of what some of these other boards and how they do their business. So, anything else? Okay. Next item we have. You didn't have anything else, right? Okay. Next item is future board meetings. This is one thing that I wanted to put up here, a new addition to it. Is it this month, a new addition? Or was it last month?
Yeah, I think last month.
Last month, okay. But it's just a reminder of the board meetings that are coming up in the next month or so, just so make sure everybody's got it on their calendar. Again, that we have a special board meeting Wednesday night. And okay, any other comments, questions?
Until 5:30, so we can give her our packets.
If there is nothing else, then the last item here we have is an opportunity for visitors to address the school board concerning any topic. Anybody here wish to address the board tonight? Okay, thank you. Anything else from any board members?
I just let you know I won't be here January 7th.
Okay. And Mr. Petermeyer got called away to a meeting today in Chicago, last minute thing, so that's why he was not able to.
Some of us who aren't retired.
Hey, well, someday. So, if there, go ahead.
I won't be at the 17th, at the board meeting on the 17th.
Okay.
I will have missed 2 of James's concerts so far before
Okay. If there's nothing else, then I need a motion to adjourn. John, you gave me a motion to adjourn. Thank you. And a second, please. Second. Thank you, Alan. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Yes, sir.